17-year-old Cassie entered a space filled with motorcycle enthusiasts dressed in leather and requested permission to join their rides, which immediately triggered amusement. However, when her dad's bike roared into the lot shortly after, all the jokes ceased abruptly. The emblem on his vest revealed a history that commanded everyone's respect, and Cassie was prepared to demonstrate her worthiness to uphold that tradition. Rusty's tavern door creaked as it swung open, allowing bright fall sunshine to pierce through years of accumulated tobacco haze and beer residue. Cassie entered, her tennis shoes making squeaky sounds on the adhesive floor, causing all discussions to halt. Being dismissed wasn't new to her. Standing just over 5 feet tall at 17, sporting a functional hairstyle and clutching a used journal to her body, she appeared as though she'd mistakenly entered the establishment. The Iron Wolves biker group had convened for their regular gathering, and this young woman's presence, pristine, youthful, and resolute, seemed ridiculously misplaced. A man with facial hair sitting at the counter shouted whether she was lost, prompting waves of amusement throughout the space. Cassie's pulse raced, yet she'd rehearsed this moment. She announced she was seeking the Iron Wolves with a business proposition. Additional mockery followed, with someone making a joke about youth organizations selling baked goods. A younger club member named Derek, whose arms displayed recent tattoos, reclined in his seat, anticipating entertainment. Moving toward the room's focal point, she compelled herself to make visual contact with them. She explained she attended Lincoln High as a final-year student and her concluding assignment involved chronicling American cultural groups. She wished to accompany them on rides to observe and record their narratives. The space exploded with incredulity rather than hostility. The concept of a scholastic assignment had this teenager wanting to shadow their expeditions like some researcher examining unusual specimens. An elder female member called Maria suggested, though more kindly than others, that this wasn't a casual attraction. Cassie prepared to speak when another sound interrupted everything, the distinctive, profound roar of an approaching Harley-Davidson. This wasn't just any motorcycle. The motor possessed a particular sound, a cadence the Iron Wolves recognized instinctively. The amusement ceased immediately. Graham entered, and the atmosphere itself appeared to reconfigure in his presence. At 58, with gray woven through his facial hair and vision that had witnessed unimaginable things, the worn leather vest he displayed was weathered, with emblems attached carefully by someone who recognized certain things held sacred meaning. His back bore the Iron Wolf symbol positioned above a smaller emblem reading, Founding Member, 1971. He glanced at Cassie, then surveyed the room. Cassie spoke his title quietly, Dad. That single word impacted like an explosive device. The senior member present, Hank, released an extended exhalation. Derek's smug expression disappeared. Maria straightened her posture. The power dynamic had completely transformed, and everyone understood it. Mocking a founding member's offspring wasn't done without repercussions. Graham positioned himself adjacent to Cassie, and she detected the recognizable aroma of engine lubricant and hide. He didn't make physical contact or provide reassurance, yet his attendance functioned as protection regardless. He asked whether she wanted to explain or if he should. Cassie swallowed with difficulty. This was her opportunity. She clarified her assignment wasn't merely about motorcycles or leather clothing but concerned what occurs when military personnel return home to find the world incomprehensible. It addressed the individuals who provided her father with motivation to continue living when the Veterans Administration couldn't, the fellowship that rescued his existence. The chamber became still differently now. Multiple members shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't their expectation. Graham's voice emerged roughly, explaining he returned from Saigon in 1971 carrying more phantoms than recollections, unable to rest, labor, or understand how to function as a person again. He paused, explaining these individuals instructed him, provided him with direction and kinship when he couldn't acknowledge his biological family. Hank rose gradually, his aged face contemplative, noting the young woman desired comprehension, which perhaps wasn't terrible. Derek contested this was organizational matters, arguing they didn't require some youth documenting them for academic purposes. Cassie clarified it wasn't academic credit but everything. Her father never discussed the conflict or his survival, yet she'd heard motorcycles on Sunday daybreaks and observed his transformation after returning from expeditions. She wanted to comprehend what restored her father to her. Maria's countenance softened, and others nodded gradually. Even Derek couldn't formulate a swift response. Graham regarded his offspring with combined pride and worry, warning it wouldn't be simple: extended journeys, early departures, and no accommodations for anyone. Cassie acknowledged this, and Graham emphasized she'd establish her position. Being his daughter granted entrance, but everything subsequent depended entirely on her. She confirmed understanding. Hank elevated his beverage, proposing they provide her an opportunity and requesting objections. The quiet provided sufficient response. Derek averted his gaze, jaw clenched, but remained silent. Cassie experienced something release internally. She'd accomplished it. She believed incorrectly that the challenging portion had concluded, unaware the expedition had merely commenced. The initial expedition nearly defeated her. Cassie had envisioned something idealistic: air flowing through her locks, unlimited highways, liberty. Reality involved muscle contractions, spinal discomfort, and persistent nervousness about maintaining pace with individuals who'd performed this for generations. She traveled behind her father on his Harley, maintaining a firm hold as they traversed Highway 9 through mountainous terrain, her journal secured in moisture-resistant packaging attached to her torso. 3 hours into the journey, they halted at a rest facility. Cassie dismounted rigidly, attempting to conceal her widespread pain. Maria materialized beside her, providing hydration. She commented the initial extended ride invariably causes suffering, adding Cassie would either adjust or wouldn't. Cassie perhaps too hastily confirmed she'd adjust. Maria examined her through cigarette vapor, asking whether her father explained why Maria belonged there and gained acceptance. Cassie indicated negatively. Maria revealed that in 1978, her spouse rode with them and perished on this roadway when an intoxicated operator crossed the median. She attended his commemorative ride wearing his vest, leaving nobody certain how to respond. She exhaled gradually, explaining she informed them of her permanent presence. Her late partner's inheritance belonged to her as well. 2 years elapsed before they ceased treating her like a spirit. When Cassie inquired how she altered their perspectives, Maria responded she didn't change anything but simply maintained attendance. Eventually, they comprehended she wasn't performing sorrow but experiencing it identically to them. Maria discarded ash, noting Cassie similarly wasn't present for theatrical purposes, which she recognized, though Derek hadn't yet perceived this. As if summoned, Derek materialized, removing his helmet and stating they were wasting daylight as some possessed actual employment the following day. The journey continued with Cassie's muscles protesting, yet she didn't request cessation. At a dining establishment outside Millbrook, the collective dispersed across booths, and Cassie finally extracted her journal. This represented her purpose. Hank slid into the seat facing her, coffee releasing vapor between his aged hands. He offered to provide narratives, then recounted his younger sibling Jimmy, how they purchased matching motorcycles in 1969, and Jimmy's death 3 months subsequently when a tire failed on Interstate 40. He explained Graham located him 2 days following the funeral service, seated in his garage with alcohol and his brother's helmet, speaking minimally but simply remaining present. He returned consecutively and ultimately transported him to a ride, stating Jimmy wouldn't desire his motorcycle accumulating dust. Cassie inquired whether that's when he joined. He clarified that's when he discovered these individuals' true nature, not revolutionaries or criminals, merely people who comprehend grief becomes manageable when progressing forward. Across the establishment, her father sat with 3 additional veterans, their discussion subdued and grave. Cassie captured fragments mentioning unfamiliar names and locations resembling military installations. This represented a Graham aspect she'd never accessed, a dialect spoken exclusively among those who'd shared particular experiences. The server delivered meals, and Derek deliberately positioned himself beside Cassie, invading her space, asking sarcastically whether she was obtaining material for her minor report. She corrected it was documentation, not a report. Derek consumed his burger forcefully, asking whether she knew what occurs when external parties document them. They err, portraying them as lawbreakers or comedic figures, questioning which category she pursued. She responded neither, explaining she attempted comprehension. Derek interrupted, insisting comprehension was impossible. She was a visitor who'd complete her assignment, receive her evaluation, and forget their existence. Maria's voice intersected the table, Instructing Derek sufficiently, Cassie stated it was acceptable, confronting his gaze, conceding she was an external party. Yet her father entrusted these individuals with his existence, which held significance for her. If she executed this incorrectly, she wasn't merely failing academically but failing him. Therefore she'd execute it correctly. Derek maintained her stare before looking away initially. That evening at the clubhouse, Cassie occupied a deteriorated sofa, examining her documentation while others played billiards and exchanged narratives. Her communication device vibrated. A message from her mother inquiring about her condition. She composed a response, then observed her father departing outside to receive a call. Through the window, she monitored his physical demeanor transformed to tense and surprised. Upon returning, Hank intercepted him, quietly asking whether that was whom he suspected. Graham confirmed slowly, revealing Tommy had learned about the assignment and desired discussion. The designation rippled through those sufficiently proximate to perceive. Tommy, even Cassie recognized it as a designation mentioned infrequently, invariably followed by quiet. Maria's voice was cautious, questioning why after 15 years. Graham explained Tommy had monitored the organization's internet presence, observed Cassie had accompanied them on rides, which stimulated contemplation about former times. Derek emerged from the rear chamber, declaring Tommy possessed no justification for presence, having made his decision. Graham responded tiredly that they all made decisions, suggesting perhaps the moment arrived to reconsider them. Cassie archived the information, detecting she'd encountered something significant. A narrative within the narrative, an unhealed injury as the evening concluded and members departed. Graham located Cassie collecting her belongings, inquiring whether she was managing adequately. She confirmed soreness but satisfaction. He acknowledged, then hesitated, referencing the Tommy situation as complicated historical matters. She indicated she was receptive. He stated not presently but soon. If she desired the complete narrative, she'd receive it, just requiring patience. Cassie shouldered her container, experiencing the significance of her daily discoveries. This no longer concerned merely motorcycles or fellowship. It addressed fractures and restoration, what transpires when kinship separates. Somehow her assignment had become the stimulus for resurfacing everything. Tommy arrived on a Thursday afternoon when the clubhouse was tranquil. Cassie was present alone, converting recorded interviews when she perceived the unfamiliar motorcycle arrive. Through the window, she monitored a man in his middle 50s dismount, lacking organizational insignia, merely plain leather and hesitant movements. He paused at the entrance, hand on the structure as though contacting something sacred or cursed, then perceived her through the glass and entered. He stated she must be Cassie, his voice carrying identical rough warmth as other members, yet underneath flowed a nervousness current. He identified himself as Tommy. She stood, suddenly conscious she was isolated with a stranger who somehow wasn't a stranger whatsoever. She mentioned her father referenced his potential communication. He responded he exceeded calling. 15 years represented extensive time for absence, reasoning if returning, he should simply materialize. His smile didn't completely reach his vision. Before Cassie could respond, Graham's vehicle entered the property. Her father emerged, froze upon observing Tommy's motorcycle, then advanced toward the clubhouse with intentional steps. The entrance opened and the two men stood separated by 3 feet and a decade and a half of silence. They exchanged names. The atmosphere between them vibrated with everything unexpressed. Finally, Graham exhaled, asking whether he wanted coffee. Tommy agreed coffee would be satisfactory. Within 60 minutes, the clubhouse filled. Information traveled rapidly within the Iron Wolves. Tommy's return constituted news demanding witnesses. Hank arrived initially, embracing Tommy with intensity that constricted Cassie's throat. Maria came subsequently, more restrained yet clearly affected. Others arrived gradually until the chamber contained nearly 20 members spanning 3 generations of organizational history. Derek was final to arrive, and his entrance modified the temperature. He stated flatly he hadn't anticipated seeing him again. Tommy admitted he hadn't anticipated returning, prompting Derek to question why presently. Tommy regarded Cassie, explaining he learned about the assignment, about Graham's offspring documenting the organization's history, which caused him to comprehend their history included portions they avoided discussing. The fragments they abandoned broken at Derek's jaw constricted, stating his father perished, believing Tommy betrayed this organization. The chamber became silent. Cassie had been recording notes, yet her writing instrument stilled. This was the injury, exposed and unhealed after all these years. Tommy didn't recoil, acknowledging he and Derek's father disagreed about the organization's trajectory. He desired them to exceed weekend enthusiasts, to utilize what they'd acquired, and survive to assist additional veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. Derek's father believed that transformed them into social assistance providers instead of riders. Derek retorted Tommy desired to alter everything they were. Tommy corrected he desired evolution, to possess significance beyond themselves. Graham spoke quietly, admitting he stated nothing. When they were destroying each other, when the organization was dividing centrally, he maintained neutrality, believing he preserved harmony. He regarded Tommy, acknowledging his silence was a decision that communicated where he genuinely positioned. Tommy's vision moistened. Expressing Graham was his closest companion. 20 years of riding collectively. He required Graham's support and Graham disappeared into neutral territory. Graham confirmed knowledge. Tommy explained he departed because remaining meant monitoring this fellowship become something tribal and limited. Every ride resembled selecting factions. Hank cleared his throat, stating for appropriate consideration, they initiated that veteran assistance program 3 years following Tommy's departure. Derek's father contested it directly until his cardiac arrest, yet they executed it. Tommy appeared astonished. Hank confirmed they currently assist transitioning veterans, connecting them with resources, including them on rides, providing them community. Modest yet genuine. Cassie monitored her father's face transform. Surprise? Remorse? Something resembling relief. Graham stated they never informed him, attributing it to pride, unwilling to acknowledge Tommy's correctness. Derek stood abruptly and departed, the entrance slamming behind him. Tommy moved to follow, yet Graham captured his arm, suggesting providing him time. He carried his father's fury because he didn't comprehend alternative actions for his sorrow. The assembly fragmented into smaller discussions. Cassie located herself beside Maria, who was wiping her vision. Maria stated this exceeded her assignment presently. She'd opened something requiring opening subsequently. As the sun descended and members drifted homeward, Cassie discovered her father and Tommy in the garage area, working on an aged Sportster that had remained damaged for months. They moved in synchronized silence, transferring tools without requesting, falling into patterns acquired decades previously. She remained in the doorway, observing. Her father stated something too quiet for perception. Tommy laughed genuinely, not the careful variety from earlier. Then Graham's shoulders shook and Cassie comprehended he was weeping. Tommy gripped Graham's neck rear and they stood there, two men supporting each other over an engine that might never operate again. Yet that wasn't genuinely the purpose. Cassie didn't record any of this. Some moments weren't intended for documentation but for witnessing and maintaining sacred. Outside, she located Derek seated on his motorcycle, helmet in his hands. She stated carefully he wasn't the antagonist Derek required him to be. Derek's voice cracked, explaining his father spent his final year furious. At Tommy, at the organization changing, at aging. He believed if he maintained that fury alive, he honored him. She suggested perhaps honoring him meant releasing it. Derek regarded her genuinely for the initial occasion since her arrival, commenting she was more resilient than her appearance suggested. She responded she'd been informed of this. He activated his motorcycle, then paused, stating when her assignment concluded, he desired to read it. Someone should document the complete narrative correctly. He rode off into the twilight and Cassie returned to the garage where her father and Tommy continued working, healing, locating their path back to what they'd lost. The motorcycle coughed once, twice, then roared to existence. The commemorative ride had been an Iron Wolf's custom for 30 years, invariably the final Sunday in May, invariably concluding at Riverside Veteran Cemetery. Yet 3 weeks following Tommy's return, Graham convened an emergency organizational gathering and proposed something different, advancing it, executing it the subsequent month, making it more substantial this year. Hank elevated an eyebrow, questioning the urgency. Graham glanced at Cassie, seated quietly in the corner with her journal, explaining waiting for perfection meant events never transpired. They possessed Tommy returned and Cassie documenting their genuine identity, They should honor their fallen while remaining present to execute it correctly. The vote was unanimous. Preparation consumed the subsequent 4 weeks. Cassie discovered herself deeply involved in unanticipated methods. Maria instructed her about the emblems, each one a narrative, an existence, an inheritance stitched into leather. They spent an afternoon in Maria's sewing chamber, surrounded by vests bearing designations of men who'd never ride again. Maria identified various patches: Hank's brother Jimmy, Derek's father Bull, and the initial member they lost in 1973, a youth named Casey. Merely 19. Cassie photographed each one, documenting not merely the emblems but Maria's hands, the needle and thread, the remembrance ritual. Tommy and Graham spent their evenings in the garage, yet presently Derek joined them. The tension hadn't vanished completely, yet something had modified. One evening, Cassie overheard Derek questioning Tommy about the assistance program he'd envisioned, asking whether he genuinely believed they could generate impact. Tommy responded he knew they could. He and Derek's father disagreed on methodology, not intention. Derek's father desired to protect their construction. Tommy desired to expand it. Both were correct and incorrect. Derek remained quiet for an extended moment, stating his father never expressed pride in him, not once. Graham responded gently he didn't know how. The conflict took some men's words, leaving them only actions. Derek decided he'd have to be different. The night before the ride, Maria requested Cassie come to the clubhouse alone. Upon arrival, the core members were present: Graham, Hank, Tommy, Maria, and Derek. On the table lay her father's original vest, the founding member emblem prominent on the rear. Maria explained they'd been discussing. What she'd accomplished these past months exceeded any scholastic assignment. She'd brought them back collectively, assisted them remembering their identity. Graham picked up the vest, explaining it had been his for 54 years. Every mile, every brother, every loss existed in this leather. He extended it toward Cassie, stating he desired her to possess it. Cassie's hands trembled, protesting she couldn't. Graham's voice was firm yet gentle, insisting she could and would. Yet they'd modify it initially. Maria produced her sewing kit and with practiced hands, began stitching beneath Graham's designation on the emblem, adding new thread in a complementary color. The needle moved steadily, creating letters spelling Cassie's designation. Tommy stated inheritance isn't about the past remaining frozen but being carried forward by someone worthy. When Maria finished, she held up the vest. 2 designations, 2 generations, 1 unbroken line. Cassie couldn't speak, simply nodding as tears streamed freely. The commemorative ride began at dawn. 73 motorcycles gathered at the clubhouse, the largest attendance in Iron Wolf's history. Information had spread through veteran networks, and riders from neighboring chapters had come to pay respects. The rumble of engines was thunder given purpose. Cassie wore her father's vest, presently their vest, with pride that felt both enormous and humble. She rode beside Graham at the front of the procession, with Tommy on his other side and Hank just behind. The formation moved through town, a river of chrome and leather, drawing people to their windows and porches, the cemetery. They gathered around a commemorative stone engraved with designations. Hank spoke initially, his voice carrying across the assembled riders, then Maria, then others who needed to speak designations allowed to remember companions who'd become phantoms. When they finished, Graham nodded to Cassie. She stepped forward, her journal open to pages worn from constant revision. She began, explaining she came to the Iron Wolves to examine a cultural group but discovered a kinship built from broken fragments. Men and women who learned that conflict's opposite isn't harmony but connection. She read excerpts from her interviews, Hank's narrative about his brother, Maria's journey from widow to warrior, her father's confession about the darkness that nearly claimed him and the brothers who pulled him back. Then she read something new, written the previous night. Tommy departed. Because he believed in growth, Derek's father remained because he believed in preservation, both attempting to protect the identical sacred thing. What she discovered as inheritance isn't choosing between past and future but stitching them collectively with steady hands and refusing to let the thread break. Tommy and Derek stood side by side, and when Cassie finished, they clasped hands briefly. Not a resolution but a beginning. The ride back was quieter, contemplative. At the clubhouse, Members lingered over coffee and narratives. Derek approached Cassie, his usual defensiveness replaced by something softer, asking whether she was returning this summer. They could use assistance with the assistance program, someone who knows how to tell narratives correctly. Cassie regarded her father, who smiled, stating it was her decision. She contacted the emblem on her back, experiencing the significance of her designation beside his, confirming she'd be back. That night, seated at her computer, Cassie opened her assignment file, 20,000 words documenting the Iron Wolves but also documenting herself, how she'd arrived as an observer and left as something else entirely. She titled it simply, Brotherhood, a Legacy in Motion. Outside, she heard her father's Harley activate, joined moments subsequently by another engine. Through the window, she observed Tommy pull up beside him. They exchanged nods, then rode off collectively into the evening. Two old companions reclaiming miles they'd lost. Cassie saved her work and smiled. Some journeys never genuinely end, they just keep progressing forward, carrying everyone brave enough to maintain hold. Cassie discovered that inheritance isn't merely about the past but possessing the courage to carry it into the future, 1 mile at a time. Sometimes the greatest journeys aren't about the destination but about honoring the road that was paved before you. What inheritance would you fight to preserve? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if the narrative moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to embrace the journey for more narratives that remind us of what truly matters.